Good afternoon, and welcome everybody to the January Town Council meeting. Before we start, I'd like to ask Mr. Gravier to explain how we'll go about doing this.
There's an echo.
Mayor, today, the meeting can be viewed on a number of different platforms. For those that are using our typical Granicus platform that you find on the town website, that will be fine to view the meeting, but you will not be able to comment. If you want to comment regarding today's meeting, then you should go to the town's website, townofbethanybeach.com, look for the headline towards the bottom of the page that mentions today's live meeting, and join the meeting via Zoom. In joining the meeting via Zoom, you'll be able to type comments or questions in the chat box and then press enter, and they will appear here on the screen and the council will address them. Prior to doing that, you will have to sign into the meeting and give your name and your address. This meeting can also be viewed today via YouTube at the Town of Bethany Beach's YouTube site. Mayor?
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there still an echo, or is that okay? Okay, all right. I'd like to welcome everyone to our January workshop. And before we start, just so that, because the picture is not up close, it's further behind, so I'd like to call everyone's name so that you know where they're seated. So could you raise your hand when I call your name, please? Joe Healy, Patrick Shepley, Jerry Morris, and Rosemary Hardiman, Lou Kilmer, Cliff Gravier, and Mr. Fry is present by Zoom there. And we also have in the room with us John Apple, our Assistant Town Manager, as well as Will Wharton, our IT Director. Faith Denault is excused today from today's meeting. Okay. First item on the agenda is discuss and review the protocol manual. And Mr. Kilmer had gone through and gave us quite an extensive list of changes that he proposed to it. Some were mostly grammatical, a couple of substantive ones. So I wanted to thank him first of all, and then do we have any thoughts on how we wanted to proceed? I noticed that some of these are grouped together like capitalization, and maybe we can decide on how we want to capitalize or not and eliminate some of those. What do you think of that? Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Okay. I think we have about 7 of them that are talk about capitalization. And in going through it, unless you capitalize titles when they're used before an individual's name and not a job title, or they don't capitalize federal, state, or local government either. So does anybody have any thoughts on that?
No, I can go along with what you recommended. Yeah,
Okay.
I won't
Is that
problem with
okay? Does anybody have any problems with these?
No.
No? With any of them? I do have one correction here, and I went through, Mr. Kilmer had recommended that on page 23, where it says, generally, the order of business, and this is on page 4 that I had given you, it's up at the top. The order of business to be followed for each council meeting shall ordinarily be as set forth in the agenda for the meeting. However, the mayor may at any time during the meeting revise the order of business, and he wanted to change on his to their own volition at the request of any member of council. And originally, to me, that there is like a chalk on like fingernails on a blackboard. However, it is correct when it's considered in the generic. I went through and checked it subsequently, so he was right on that, and I would accept that as a change too. and then the planning and zoning and everything else.
Mr. Mayor, what about the use of council? I notice we use it as capital and non-capital and so forth. Do we have any references to when it should be a capital?
I think that it was just common usage. I don't know how we want to do that going forward. Some of them are capitalized in here and some of them are lowercase, so in terms of keeping it the same, how do we want to handle it?
I think if it's preceded by "the,"
Yeah.
you generally capitalize the
Okay.
council.
All right,
Okay,
all right, then why don't we accept that?
so if it's got "the" in front of it, then we'll capitalize it. The
Right.
other comment I had was on page 51. It's that one page that you said should be hyphenated. Is that,
I didn't know. Page 51.
what you've got here is point,
Oh, one page.
one page. Is
Yeah.
it should be hyphenated?
Oh, one page overview sheet. That was suggestion. I have no problem with that, do you?
I mean, since we're talking about grammar, I don't understand why it should be hyphenated. Not that it makes a difference, but my only comments. Guess I should have so you can hear me.
Well, I guess because it modifies overview sheet.
That's fine.
Okay, okay. So any additional comments or suggestions on this, on the protocol manual? Okay.
I would ask all of you to please speak into the mics. We're getting a comment that we're muffled.
Oh, okay. Could
Okay.
you?
Excuse me.
Okay.
So I mean,
Speak into your mic and take your mask, lower your mask so people at home can hear.
So people can hear you. Okay.
It's tough to remember, I know, but, okay, the second item on the agenda, if we're finished that, is to discuss and review committee guidelines. And I think on this, we'll probably have a more in-depth discussion. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Shepley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to propose 3 changes to the committee guidelines. Council members should have a summary of these changes from our November meeting. My proposals today are slightly different from that summary. I will present each change and give my understanding as to the reason or reasons these were included originally, as well as my reasons for each proposed change. The first proposed change, if you would look at the document titled Bethany Beach Committee Guidelines, the first proposed change is on page 2, item H. I propose to delete the first sentence that reads, quote, "Committee members must be citizens of the town of Bethany Beach in order to be a full voting member of any committee," end quote. If you turn back a second to page 1, under the second paragraph titled Definitions, you will see that a citizen is defined as, quote, "Any person who owns property in the town of Bethany Beach or has been a full-time resident for a minimum of 30 days, end quote. I will use the term non-citizen for anyone who does not meet that definition. My understanding is when the guidelines were first developed, it was recognized that non-citizens may well be valuable members of a specific committee due to their experience, knowledge, and/or background. Council realized that committees have the potential to have a significant impact on the town concerning resources, staffing, and priorities, as well as other areas. It was felt that those recommendations should only be made by the stakeholders, i.e. the property owners in Bethany Beach. Therefore, non-citizens could serve on committees, but should not be allowed to vote on committee issues. I wholeheartedly agree that there are instances where non-citizens either volunteer or are asked to serve on a town committee due to their experience, knowledge, and/or background. Today, we have more than one non-citizen serving as valuable contributing members of town committees. As you know, all committee chairs and committee members are approved by council. We ask all committee members to devote their time and energy to committee business, as well as attend and participate in committee meetings. And yet, if the current guidelines are followed, we do not allow non-citizen members to vote. I feel this is wrong. If we allow non-citizens, and in my opinion we should, to serve on a committee, we should also allow them to participate fully as committee members, including the right to vote. And I thought, Mayor, that might be most efficient to discuss these changes one at a time.
I agree. Are you finished with that particular?
Yes, I am
Okay.
finished.
Thank you, Mr. Shepley. Does anyone have any comments?
Well, I personally have a problem about having a non-citizen vote on, well, I'm very receptive to have them share their expertise with the town, but I don't think a non-citizen should basically be there to vote on the future direction of the town. They aren't, it's like, well, I'll stop at that point. I don't agree with that.
Does anybody else have any comments? If not, I do. Mr. Healy?
I would kind of go along with what Lou has to say. They're not stakeholders is the term that I would use, and therefore I think their advice would be helpful, but I really don't know that they should be have a final say. Thank you.
Mr. Morris, did you have anything?
Well, it seems hypocritical if you're asking people to devote their time to the town and use their expertise to help us, and then not asking them or permitting them to vote. They would only be one member on a committee. I doubt very strongly that they would swing the vote one way or the other, but it seems unusual that you would use them and then not permit them to participate.
Okay. I'm going to express my, Mr. Gravier?
Over the years, we have always had a number of people who have had an interest on serving on committees, and usually that number exceeds the number of positions on the committee. And I don't know over the long term how that impacts the person that wants to be a citizen, a taxpayer that wants to be on a committee, and sees someone who's not a resident on a committee and voting. So I believe, and I was here when that was crafted, the reason it was crafted that way was so people from out of town, who live out of town, could participate, contribute if they like, but at the same time, citizens who wanted to be on committees wouldn't feel disenfranchised.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think that it was, as originally crafted, it was intended that if there weren't enough people with expertise, say audit committee, budget and finance, that we could get people who did have that expertise who were from people from out of town. However, you know, when we sent out a call recently for people to serve on our 3 new committees, we were inundated with volunteers, which may be a different experience from previously. And I think if there's that much interest in town, these are the people who should be tapped first. What we did was we put them on the committees. We had, there was a need for a couple of additional people on other existing committees, and we sent the names of the people who weren't selected for these 3 new committees to them, and there's going to be 2 of them approved or presented for approval at the upcoming meeting on Friday. So I think we have enough interest among our citizens in town, and that gives me a great deal of encouragement and optimism. I think that there are times where, say, for example, on an audit committee, if you wanted someone with experience in that area, and we don't have someone with experience who's come forward to volunteer, I don't see any problem with tapping someone from out of town who has the experience if they're willing to share their expertise. But when you share your expertise and then vote on your opinion, to me, that's something different. I don't think they should have the right to vote. I think they've been asked to serve, to present, to give their expertise, and if they want to do that, that's fine. Also, on 4th of July Parade Committee, that's a little different, because I think, and we talked something about maybe taking them out of the committee, the committee structure governed by those rules, because they were added, they were a group that existed prior to becoming a committee, isn't that correct?
Yes, they existed, have always been a working group where everyone is on the ground and contributing to the parade that day.
And the parade does include people from Ocean View, from South Bethany, from Bethany, so it's
It just simply morphed into us then having somebody sit in when Julie began to sit in, and we produced minutes, and we sort of made it a formal committee, again, when it was usually it had been comprised for a long time from people in the area, not just in
right.
Bethany.
I would consider that a little bit different, because I think that right at the present time, Mr. Fry has people on there who are not per se citizens of Bethany Beach, and I don't have a problem with that, because I don't regard that as one of our, I think that kind of morphed into becoming a part of the town. But I do have a problem, and just for what it's worth, I know Rehoboth went through this exercise in November, and they decided that, people who are non-citizens can be asked to be on a committee to share their expertise, but they're non-voting members as well. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting a consensus of the committee, which to me is different from a vote. But, and I feel very strongly that this was intended to be something that non-citizens with expertise could be asked to join a committee to share that expertise if it's not otherwise available in town, but they wouldn't be given the right to vote.
Another way to look at it is as non-paid consultants.
Yeah.
Rosemary, Mayor, I understand exactly what you're saying, as long as you would tell a person who was contributing this that they understand we're just using them as a consultant and they do not have the right to vote. They might come onto the committee and think they do have that right.
Right.
Not knowing all the protocol.
Right.
So that would have to be explained to them right up front.
Right. And I wouldn't even ask them to be on a committee unless we couldn't find the talent or expertise among our own citizens.
I think the comment that Lou made makes more sense to me now, and I understand it. You're using them as an outside, basically as an outside consultant. Okay.
Yes.
With all due respect to my council members who have voiced their opposing views, I do respect those views, but they're the exact views that I stated for the reasons why the guidelines were set up the way they were in the first place. Frankly, I think those are outdated and wrong. And Mayor, you mentioned that you feel strongly about this. That's fine. I just want you to know that I feel equally as strongly about this.
Right.
That this is wrong to ask someone to devote their time, resources, effort to a committee and then not give them the opportunity to vote on matters that come before that committee. And I will remind everybody, as I mentioned, that this body approves chairman of every committee and members of every committee that particular chairperson recommends. So if we are concerned that somebody may vote not in the best interests of the town, we should equally be as concerned that they shouldn't even be on the committee in the first place. And I do want to make it clear, although it's not stated in the current guidelines, I would not be opposed to putting something in the guidelines. It is stated that we encourage citizens to ask to serve on committees, and if we wanted to put something in here that gives priority to citizens over non-citizens, I would be fine with that. But I do feel very strongly that if we're going to ask someone to serve on a committee, that person should be a full-fledged member of that committee, and I'm not concerned that they may vote a different way than a citizen would.
Actually, I think what we should do is clarify in the committee guidelines that, subject to council approval, a non-citizen with expertise in matter within a committee's purpose and scope may be invited to join a committee as a non-voting member to provide input on such matters. But I also think that when, you bring up a very good point, I think that when someone when you're providing a list of people you want to be on a committee, a chair, at the meeting, I think it's important going forward that we say whether a person, we have to provide the Bethany Beach address, and it has to be within the town limits. We should know if there's a person on the committee that is not a citizen. And I think that the person, if we, depending upon how we go forward, if we go forward with the way it is now, I think it should be made clear to the person up front when they're asked to join a committee and they're a non-citizen, what that means, out of fairness. And if they agree to do it, well, then fine. If somebody asked me in Ocean View to be on a committee to share expertise, I don't know what I have expertise in, but to share something, I'd be happy to help them, even if it meant I was non-voting, because you're sharing with your fellow community. Anyway, that's just, Lou?
No, I just scratched my head.
Well, we didn't solve anything.
I
but
think
we-
I've said my piece.
said my
I think you know where I stand.
And I think you know where I stand.
I'm not 100% sure how to go forward, but I do intend to make this proposal at, I mean, I understand we're not going to vote on that today,
No.
but I will make this Friday at the council meeting, and I personally will not support any proposal that continues this restriction on non-citizen members of committees.
Duly noted.
Again, just my
Oh.
personal opinion.
No. And that, on Fridays when we would vote on it, yeah. Anybody else? Oh, Bruce, do you have anything to add, Mr. Fry?
I guess two things. One, I think the parade committees, as Cliff said, is a little different from the other committees.
We
We're not
can't hear
doing
you, Bruce.
significant- You can't hear me?
You can't hear you? I can hear him that well.
You
Okay,
can't hear me?
yeah.
Barely.
Okay. Gotcha,
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
yes. Okay,
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay, two things. I agree with Cliff, that the parade committee is slightly different from the others. We're not doing, quote, significant things like the audit committee or the budget committee. So I think maybe that we should have less formal rules. But back to Patrick's point, I understand what he's saying, but I personally think if you're a citizen, a tax-paying person, those should be the people who vote on money and not non-residents. So I like it the way it is. I'm sorry, Patrick, but I just don't agree. Could you hear me?
Yes. Thank you,
Okay,
thank
good.
you. Okay, shall we continue?
Second proposal.
Thank you, Mayor. And Bruce, I did hear you, I just didn't want to hear you. My second proposed change is on page 3, item J, the second sentence. I propose that we modify that sentence and replace the phrase, quote, non-resident citizens, end quote, with, quote, committee members, end quote. The second sentence would then read, quote, committee members should be accommodated as much as possible if such accommodation does not interfere with the workings of the town and its staff, end quote. This proposed change deals with the difference between a full-time resident property owner, such as all 6 of my fellow council members, and a non-resident property owner, such as myself. A non-resident citizen is anyone who owns property in the town but does not live here full-time. Bethany Beach is somewhat unique in that we allow non-resident property owners to be elected officials as well as serve on our committees. Again, it is my understanding that when these guidelines were written, there was concern that non-resident committee members may request accommodations that would interfere with the workings of the town. One example of this might be that they would request that committee meetings be held on Saturday, and that would incur unnecessary and additional expenses for the town. I would speculate that a full-time resident that still works full-time might request the same accommodation. This proposed change would delete the distinction of and reference to non-resident citizens. I don't feel that we need to single out that group, or any group for that matter, in this particular guideline. Just as a matter of fact, non-resident property owners outnumber resident property owners by more than 5 to 1 and are equally represented on our committees. My proposal deletes the reference to non-resident citizens and simply states that all committee members should be accommodated as much as possible. Thank you, Mayor.
Anybody have any comments? Mr. Kilmer?
I have a couple comments in that regard. First of all, maybe we should not just call it non-residents. Maybe we shouldn't say non-residents at all, say non-resident property owners to be a little more specific, rather than non-resident citizens. Be a little more specific. So, because what does that mean? Because in the state of Delaware, actually, in our town, it's very unusual that this, in other states, is not permitted. You'd have to be a resident. So I think a non-resident property owner would be a little more specific, and maybe a little more clarifying. And the other issue that's been brought to light during the pandemic, in our code, if you're a non-resident property owner, you're supposed to be here for the meetings. Not set up a teleconference because of the difficulty not having all the documents in front of you, not being able to, have a conversation. But with the pandemic, things have changed. And they might be changing for the future also. So I think that's something we should readdress within our guidelines about teleconferences, where when the circumstances require it, that they are permitted. So a non-resident property owner can still meet their obligations as a member by using teleconferencing. So I mean that's I think something that has to be addressed and updated in our guidelines.
To kind of build on what Patrick said, all committee members could ask to have something changed because maybe they were traveling, or maybe they were out of town at the time of the meeting and say, I'd like to have the meeting moved to a different date. So I don't see the difference as to why we specify non-resident as opposed to just committee members. I mean, all committee members have that right, and as long as it doesn't interfere with things, that decision has to be made, whether they're a citizen or a non-citizen.
But that goes back to our rules about you have to be here.
Well, I understand that.
So I mean, but I think that's why this is written the way it is.
But again, I would agree with Mr. Morris that a request for an accommodation could be made by any member of a committee, whether they are a full-time resident, a non-resident property owner, or even a non-citizen, as we discussed in the first proposed change. And all those requests should be dealt with the same. They should be looked at in terms of, is it reasonable? Does it impose some additional effort and expense on the town, such as a request to hold a meeting on a Saturday or Sunday, a holiday, whatever it might be, regardless of who made the request. And that's all this proposed change does. Just says all committee members are are treated the same as far as requests for accommodations.
Do we even need that sentence in there? I mean, I don't know if we're going down a slippery slope with even having the sentence in there. Should it even be in there? Just as a matter of discussion, that's all.
Again, maybe I'm not saying, I think the only reason that was in here is because of the previous requirement of a teleconference. Or not, you had to be here. And I think that's why it was here. There's the difference between accommodations of, we have to change the date, you know, because it's some conflict of interest, you know, I mean, and everybody agrees with it. But the fact that I've been maybe here a little too long, but there were people who just never wanted to come. They just wanted to have it as a teleconference. And we didn't want to, we felt that was, you know, the technology is better, but it's still not good from my perspective. But there's the inability of having all the documents in front of you when you're at a distant location. And sometimes it's very difficult to say, well, what document are you talking about? You know, because they don't have them or whatever. So, I mean, I think that the only difference, I think the only thing here was the accommodation was to deal with that specific issue. And now that things have changed, I think it's not going to be so much of an issue anymore when teleconferencing will be permitted because of when the circumstances require it. It's my opinion.
Mr. Gravier?
Mr. Kilmer's recollection is correct. There was, when these were developed, there was a strong disinclination on the part of the town council to create the sort of situation where committee members or council members could attend everything via a telemeeting. And the sense was that if you had an interest in participating in government, you should make the effort to be in attendance in person. So one of the things that I've wondered about, and this certainly won't address that, but is how the council will feel when we move away from this Zoom format. Will the council want to continue to adhere to that type of a regulation and say, okay, well, if you want to participate, your obligation is to be here in person, or change that? So this has, I think, sort of other implications besides just the wording and how someone might take the wording.
So are you suggesting something then?
No, I'm just,
Yeah.
as
Mayor?
a point.
Again, I respect the comments that have been made. I just don't agree with them. This change, actually, the initial statement as it's in the guidelines now, doesn't address attendance at meetings at all. It's addressed elsewhere. And I believe there is a requirement of attending so many meetings or not missing so many meetings in person, and you won't be on the committee.
Well, then why does-
This does not address attendance at all.
What does it address?
It addresses any request for an accommodation,
But you
which
see,
I
that's
don't know
where-
what that could be.
That's why I think we're going down a slippery slope by even having that in there.
Well, I mean, you can propose that we take it out, but I think if we leave it in, it's, again, it is similar to my first proposal in that I don't think we need to designate certain groups or
No.
categories of
Oh, no.
people for
No.
certain treatment.
I
It's
agree with you.
everybody.
I agree with you, and I have no problem with that. I have a problem with the word accommodated and what it means and what it could mean. That's all. I could want to meet on the beach.
Sure, and you could make that request.
Sounds good.
No, but I just don't know what accommodated means.
It's too broad of a word.
It's too broad. In my opinion, I would rather just take out that whole sentence than, because then it implies that, I mean, do we have anything that specifically says council members should be accommodated?
I don't know.
And yet we work it out we work things out, don't we? I don't know. It's just a thought.
No, I agree with you. Maybe we should just take it out completely, and then it's one of these things that each committee has the responsibility of being there or not being there or whatever.
Well, again, these are all guidelines
These are-
for
yeah,
committees, and the
exactly.
reason they're in there is to give chairpersons of committees and committee members some type of guidance on things. I'm not saying your suggestion
No.
is wrong, but that's why all these things are in there.
No, and I'm not saying yours is either. I'm just saying it just brings up another question in my mind, that was all.
But we've already said that we took it out. There's still another thing that says you're supposed to be at the meeting. I mean, physically at the meeting. That should cover that. And if
Not
you-
committees,
Pardon me?
council people.
Only council people have to be there?
That was in, that's, but I don't think, I didn't find it under committees. I think council people had to be here.
But there's something in FOIA that talks about,
There is,
Yeah.
there is something somewhere.
there is,
In the protocol manual, maybe, that specifically talks about council and any group or committee that is formed by council.
right. And there has to be, there's something having to do with the ability of the public to be able to attend wherever the people are, like, say, if Patrick's attending as a committee member from Maryland, there would have to be the ability for someone to attend there, too. I don't, it's something crazy, but it's,
Another possibility is to define what accommodated is rather than taking it out.
yeah.
Perhaps we can come up with a better word or
Because
term.
accommodated could be a lot of things.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, should be accommodated regarding the ability to be present
meeting dates or
or
something, yeah,
meeting days.
yeah.
Because, I mean, that could be a lot of
Well,
different things.
as you just mentioned, Mayor, it could be something as, I'm going to say simple, as just the date of a meeting. Not necessarily a Saturday, a Sunday, a night meeting, but just a committee says, let's have a meeting on the 23rd, and somebody says, I'm not available on the 23rd, can we make it the 24th? So that's also an accommodation.
And that's a good one.
Well, also, there's another accommodation that's happened every once in a while is location. To be a major weather event where we actually didn't meet here, we met at a different location. We met at the auxiliary structure. So, I mean, that's another kind of accommodation, so. But there's been times this road's underwater, so.
Mr. Shepley, would you be satisfied if we took it out totally?
I'd like to think
Yeah,
about
think
that.
about that.
Think about it till Friday? Okay,
Well, give some thought to what accommodation might mean, too.
okay.
Is another way, yeah.
Are we done with that one, Mayor? Bruce? I'm not sure
No
I want to,
comment.
I'm not sure I want to hear you, Bruce.
I don't have any strong views either way on this one.
Oh, boy, there's a fence.
Okay. My third proposed change. This change is actually two related changes in order to reflect what is actually happening with council actions and when those actions occur. It replaces naming specific months with specific council meetings. And I'm not aware of any reason for keeping the current wording or even why it was in there in the first place. However, these changes, I think, reflect what is actually happening today and allows us to maintain the current timing if the annual organizational meeting is delayed or scheduled for a different month. On page 2, under term, you will notice that the current guidelines reference the specific months of October and November. I propose to replace the first and second sentences with the following and change the order of these sentences for clarity so that it flows in chronological order. I would like to read these changes twice, again for clarity, so bear with me. These are my proposed changes. This is the change, quote, normally, committee chairpersons shall be appointed annually during the town council organizational meeting. Committee appointments expire annually except those with multi-year limits, at the close of business on the Thursday prior to the next regular town council meeting after the organizational meeting. Committee members shall be appointed annually during that same meeting. Again, I'd like to read this twice just to clarify what I'm trying to clarify in the guidelines. So, quote, normally, committee chairpersons shall be appointed annually during the town council organizational meeting, which is normally our September meeting, or at least it has been since I've been involved. Committee appointments expire annually, except those with multi-year limits. Currently, the guidelines say multi-term limits. And Mayor, as you pointed out, I think that should be multi-year limits. At the close of business on the Thursday prior to the next regular town council meeting after the organizational meeting. So the next regular town council meeting after the organizational meeting is October. Those committee appointments would expire the day before that meeting, and then committee members shall be appointed annually during that same October meeting. I believe this wording gives us, first of all, it states what's actually happening now. And second of all, if for some reason, if we leave it like it is now with specific months, we could change them to September and October. But if there's some reason that the organizational meeting is postponed or delayed, a natural disaster, a pandemic emergency that cancels meeting, we can still follow these guidelines based on when we have the organizational meeting. And the committee members continue in place until that happens. The second part of this change then, on page 4, the last paragraph at the end of the guidelines, I propose to replace the word November with, quote, next regular town council meeting after the organizational meeting. The first sentence will then read, quote, these guidelines shall be reconfirmed annually at the next regular town council meeting after the organizational meeting. Again, replacing a specific month with a time of the annual organizational meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Could you read that first one again, please?
Yes, let's go through that whole thing again. Bruce,
Just the first one.
are you serious?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Normally, committee chairpersons shall be appointed annually during the town council organizational meeting.
Reorganization, not organization.
Well,
No,
it could be whatever, but in here it was
Well, that's what you
specified
have.
as the organization.
Is that from you?
Pardon?
Isn't this document from you?
I still didn't hear you.
Isn't this document from you? The proposed changes that you
Yeah,
said?
but I changed some of the things
He
from
changed-
those
he's changed-
proposals
I asked him
in
to
Got a different one myself.
October, yes.
All right.
And I did state that early on.
Just a point of clarification, we have,
But-
it's expressed differently. It's expressed organizational and reorganizational and different things that we do. However, the charter refers to it as organizational. So maybe we should do that.
I wouldn't have a problem with either one,
No, I wouldn't either.
but
I wouldn't
we should
either.
probably be consistent. So would you like me to?
Please, yes, thank you.
Normally, committee chairpersons shall be appointed annually during the town council organizational meeting. Committee appointments expire annually, except those with multi-year limits, at the close of business on the Thursday prior to the next regular town council meeting after the organizational meeting. Committee members shall be appointed annually during that same meeting. And I do apologize that it's not the same as
No.
the document that you were given in October for my
My only
changes.
comment is, and I like it, if you want it to be generic, you said the Thursday before. Do you want to say the day before? Because that could change too.
You are correct, and I would not have any problem with the day before.
Does anybody have any comments? Mr. Healy, no? Mr. Fry, any comments?
I like it.
Okay.
Are we still friends?
Mr. Kilmer?
Thank you, Bruce.
No?
There are only 2 strikes against you, not 3.
Okay,
Thank you, Mayor.
thank you.
Yeah, it is an interesting phenomena dealing with governments per se, is that, it's like even the federal stuff, everything is like stated like that, the third Thursday of the second month of the fifth.
know.
Yeah, so,
After a full moon.
yeah, exactly. But it's amazing how many functions within the federal and state governments actually in their protocols state exactly like that, like it's the second Thursday of first. It's, so this makes it, this clarifies it quite a bit. And it also takes out specific, timelines when it's very more generic.
Mayor, if I could just make one other brief comment that Lou reminded me of. A number of years ago, I was down in the Caribbean islands on a vacation, and my wife and I were walking through the town. Joe, you will appreciate this. We came upon a storefront that had a sign out front that said, Willie Jones, Certified Public Accountant, office hours, the second Tuesday of every week.
Well, what do you expect from a CPA? Is that all then? Okay. Could you repeat it, please? Does anyone else have?
I do perform stand-up Tuesday nights down.
Okay. Finish that, we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, which is discuss and review the draft of a small cell and related documents. Mr. Gravier.
Mayor, council, this has been a long time coming. You all will remember, I guess it's been about 18 months, 2 years ago, the draft document that we received and we reviewed in the workshop that I don't think any of us could quite get our heads around or understand. So we've been involved in small cell and trying to create a small cell ordinance that was workable, and I think we've been able to do that. What you have in your packet are 3 separate documents. One is a personal wireless services facilities ordinance, and the other one is a wireless facilities in the public right-of-way. And then the third document is a resolution for the council to consider. In the material that was left at your places here, there you'll see a page 7. And it's, that page 7 replaces the page 7 in the right-of-way document.
Okay.
And it's obviously worded as an ordinance. Do you all have that?
Yes.
Okay. So it should be inserted into the right-of-way ordinance in place of what exists. I'd like to start this discussion by asking you to look at the personal wireless services facilities ordinance, not the right-of-way ordinance. And this is a draft ordinance that would control the installation of small cell antennas or towers, whatever, outside of the public right-of-way. For instance, it would pertain if the fire company came to us and said we wanted to put another antenna up, another tower, and a small cell facility on it. If a business owner on Garfield Parkway came to us and said, I've been approached by a private vendor, and they want to put some sort of a small cell on my roof. If one of the commercial properties on Route 26 came to us and again said, want to do a small cell, a tower, and I want to place it on my property, and for all the other unforeseen potential installations of small cells that might occur in town, this ordinance would apply to that. As you read the ordinance, it gives basic definitions. It speaks to the process for the application, and it also says that the part that we generally are the most concerned about, but design standards are not listed, and design standards will, at some point in time, be adopted by the council, and that the manager, at a different point in time, after they're codified by the town council, may change them. There are no design standards because this came to us late in the process when we began to ask the questions of the attorney that's working on this for us. What would happen if somebody wanted to put a faux dormer on the front of a business on Garfield Parkway, or the hotel wanted to put antennas on the top of their building? How could we regulate that? So going forward, we will ask our solicitor or our attorney that's handling this particular, the development of this ordinance for us, to help us craft the design standards. But there are so many potential different applications that it may just be simply something that says, number one, that this will comply with the standards set by the FCC, and that each individual application has to be considered on an individual basis, because I don't know what kind of a document we could create that would cover all those standards, other than to say has to comply with zoning, has to comply with building, those blanket things, but each one must be considered as an individual item. So that will be coming to us, but I still would like the council to consider this. I still would like to move forward with the first reading on this document. And even if the design standards come after the second reading, the document will be in place, and we can use the premise of a pending ordinance doctrine if anybody makes any kind of an application to us. Do any of you have any questions on the personal wireless services facilities? And again, these are for installations outside of the public right-of-way.
The only question I have is, the terminology, personal wireless, actually means more than just a person. It could be a corporation or a company or whatever. Is that true?
Yes, really the most important definition is small cell facility. And the definition of that, which is contained in this, is specific to what we're talking about. But this covers the small cell facility as opposed to the wireless.
But I kind of agree with you. I would rather use the word a person or entity, because I can look at like a homeowners association, not a single person doing this, like putting one in for their own community.
Yeah, but I thought somewhere, help me out, Rosemary, we were talking about this the other day, and I thought you sent me a note that said personal wireless actually doesn't mean necessarily an individual person. It could be a company or corporation or whatever.
Or an
It's
entity.
it's meant to identify the type of service that's provided. So it's a personal wireless service. It's not,
Okay.
it's not speaking to your personal wireless.
Okay,
It's the type of service that's provided.
okay,
Right.
yes. And again, this is for anything that's not in the right-of-way, which we have no control over at all.
Well, yes, if someone came to us and wanted to put a small cell facility on top of the hotel again, that would have to be reviewed. We would have to go through some sort of a permitting process. It certainly would toll the building permit, and this gives us the additional ability to regulate that.
Do these small cells only apply to telephone service, or might they apply to internet and possibly even eventually television service.
But this will, I don't know that there's, it would be a streaming of television
Yeah.
through your internet connection provided by the signal from this tower or this facility.
So I know when I first read this, I'm thinking strictly just my cell phone.
No.
The cell phone service, but we need to be aware that it may
Absolutely.
involve more services than just a wireless or cell phone.
The potential for 5G is what's driving all of this, and 5G at some point in time will carry both a telecommunication and Wi-Fi signal. So again, this is specific. There is no draft resolution. I believe that the resolution that will be created, again, will be fairly generic. I can't imagine that we can get into the specifics of what can be placed on a roof and what can be placed on a pole and all those different design elements. But the clearest thing I can, as a point of reference, would say that this would apply if the fire company wanted to move its antenna or do something different from what it has there, and the small cell facility that was placed on their antenna. This would help us regulate that. The questions? Mr. Fry?
No,
I think Mr. Shepley has a question.
Sir?
Cliff, do we have requests currently from any providers to install these type of antennas?
Out of the public right-of-way, no. And that's why this was almost an afterthought. We were going after the wireless facilities in the public right-of-way. During those discussions, we said, well, how are we going to, when somebody comes to us for, again, if we can't accommodate someone, the situation, especially maybe on Garfield Parkway, where the light poles don't work for every application, maybe someone comes to us and says, well, I want to do so-and-so. So this will, we put it in place, we work on the resolution, and we adopt the resolution to try to control that.
Yeah, Patrick, I think that's really important because the fact that if someone wants to do something that really we don't think is appropriate, where's to say they can't do it? Here, it says it right here. I think, again, hats off to Cliff of being proactive on this because it's coming. Fortunately for us, we got a little bit of time because the people who want 5G and stuff, this is not a high priority area. But it will at some point migrate to this area. And I think it's nice to have these things ahead of time, discuss them, have them on board to protect our interests.
No, I agree with that. And just as a little further clarification, there are some new cans, for lack of a better term, that have been installed in the last, 6 months or so in town. Those are not 5G antennas in those cans. Those are some prior generation 4G.
Are these 4G LTE, John, or are they 5s?
They're fives.
The ones up at the beach along Pennsylvania are 5. The macro tower here at the fire station is a 4, LTE 4.
But some of the, I'm just going to say newer installations are 5G antennas. Is anybody offering 5G services in our town?
No.
No.
But you have to have the infrastructure to do it.
Right.
What's driving?
Exactly.
What's driving providers, the bigger providers right now is, and Dewey's having an issue with their installations, Rehoboth is having installations, they're actually considering using some of the streetlights on the boardwalk in Rehoboth, is that these companies want to identify areas where there is a large congregation of potential customers like our oceanfront during the summer. So for all the people that visit who have 5G back in metropolitan areas, they can continue to have phone service. So they're looking for busy areas, Garfield Parkway, the beach, and that's where their first installations of 5G are occurring.
And these are in anticipation, or as Lou said, setting up the infrastructure to be able to offer 5G service.
No,
within
right now, if the antenna is up, I would imagine if you have a 5G telephone and you live in Alexandria and you get to the edge of Ocean View Parkway, you'll be able to use your 5G cell phone with the same speeds that you would expect back in Alexandria.
Okay.
But this is telecommunication at this point in time. It is
Yeah.
not internet.
My next question is, does this discussion of the small cell antennas have any impact on our new franchise agreement with Comcast? Or is
No.
Comcast strictly wires under the ground and?
As we have said till we are blue in the face, our franchise agreement is cable television service,
No, I realize that.
right? But no,
But just
no.
for clarity,
But no, the only potential impact it would have are business decisions both Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast all make, because I believe you're seeing Comcast showing an interest because they see the potential for ultimately to have to compete with vendors who sell 5G service.
If I could expand on it. So in terms of their ability to make revenue here and the reason for setting up the small cells, it's the data package that comes with your service. So now that everybody is using these different streaming applications and social media, you have your Pandora that plays, your Spotify, people go out on the beach, they play their music, they're showing each other pictures on Snapchat, so on and so forth. If you're using data on your phone, that's where they make their money. Instead of being up on the beach saying, oh, I don't get any service, I can't play this, they're able to now, and they're able to use data which they can get charged for.
Aren't all the things that poles that are being put on Route 1 5G? I mean, we see them, Route 1 has got, even in Bethany, there's like 10 of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, those are all, to the best of my knowledge, they are.
And again, it's one of the main thoroughfares.
It's on the road-
while you-
it's
while
on the
you're-
right-of-way, which we-
While you're driving the main thoroughfares, they want their customers to be able to receive it, yes. Other questions?
Are we going to talk about certain changes or recommendations? Is this the time to do it here for the ordinance?
Sure.
A couple things, if I may. I'm talking about this document here with the ordinance itself. There's a couple terms in here that I guess they're lawyer terms, like on page 1, I don't know how to.
I looked it up in the dictionary.
It's inconvenience.
I looked up in the dictionary, it says inconvenience or distress or
So I
discomfort.
like
Why
to-
don't we just use that?
Yeah, I like to, I had no idea what that word meant. It's the next to last sentence. It says,
Yeah.
public is not, how do you even pronounce that? Incommodated?
Accommodated?
Incommodated? I had no idea what that word meant, so.
Yeah, I had to look, you're on a different one. You're on, I think he's on the
You're-
the ordinance.
493, chapter 493.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we were
Article
in
6.
525. Is everyone okay with 525?
Yeah.
What's that?
The one that's personal wireless service facilities, amending chapter 525.
Oh. Yeah,
Do you even have it? Yeah, I know you have that one.
This is what I'm talking about, this document here, the ordinance.
There's two draft ordinances.
Yeah, I'm with him. I didn't get that. I mustn't have downloaded it, but that's
I
okay.
must have the first.
Well,
That's the second thing we'll discuss.
Yeah, 493.
oh, we haven't discussed that one.
We haven't discussed it
No.
yet, yes. These were, let's see, these were all emailed to everyone on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments on the the chapter 525 personal wireless services facilities?
No.
Okay. The reason we're here is really to craft something that gives us the control, as much control as we can have, in regulating small cell installations in the public right-of-way. And the other ordinance that applies to 493 wireless facilities in the public rights-of-way does that. One of the more important things contained in this draft ordinance is beginning at the bottom of page 2 and going into page 3, and unfortunately, the pages are numbered. Good for us. Yes, didn't see it. Is the definition, and this is the definition that's contained in the federal code that deals with what we're actually talking about when we talk about a small cell facility. It speaks to the size, the height, and all the things that any vendor must comply with in the design and installation of a small cell facility. With that said, when a vendor complies with this and wants to deliver signal, it's very, very hard to prohibit them from delivering signal if they can make the case there is no other way for me to deliver signal other than installing a pole at this specific location. Yes.
Mr. Garve, do we have to, is this the reason we're having someone with more expertise in the area than we have to review the application? Do we have to accept their word for it, that there's no other way?
Well, one of the things that's it's come out of our work here, and John's, when he goes out to permit and deals with some of the people permitting, is that we've become aware of a company that's doing a lot of this work here in the state for the city of Wilmington and for the Delaware Department of Transportation. And it's JMT Engineering. For those of you that remember JMT Engineering, they actually designed our streetscape project, and one of their branches is very active in reviewing applications, creating an application process, and reviewing the applications to make sure that vendors comply with all the strictures contained in ordinances. JMT does this for DelDOT, as I said, and the city of Wilmington. No one else in Delaware yet, John? No. And we've entered into an agreement with them that when we have this in place, they will be the organization that takes applications, reviews applications, meets the shock clock requirements, and makes sure they comply with not only federal standards, but our standards also.
Mm-hmm. So they would be, so, for example, if the Verizon or someone who wanted to provide the service said this is the only way we can provide it, you know, in other words, we can't co-locate or can't do this or can't do that, would JMT be able to determine whether or not this is true?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
that was just my
I mean,
concern.
some of it's fairly basic. I mean, we know that that the circumference that some signal travels, it's pretty standard.
Right.
So when, in some of the things we've done where people have come to us and said, well, I have to have a pole here, I can't put it here because, well, that's been fairly boilerplate. But the measuring the electromagnetic frequencies, other things, the cubic feet, the type of antenna, the particulars of the installation, yes, they're be far more adept than we will
Yeah,
in
that
administering
was-
the ordinance.
That's good. Thank you.
But, so these are the very basics. And again, if they meet all the criteria, if the installation is the right size, the right cubic feet, so on and so forth, it is very, very difficult to push them away or change what they're doing. To that end, let's go over the, you had concerns about this, Mr. Kilmer.
Yes, a couple questions and more. On page 3, under tower, there's a term there that says microwave backhaul. Shouldn't that be defined? It's the next last sentence there under tower.
We'll have them put that in.
Yeah, because I mean, actually, I went on the internet and I was confused of reading the definition. That's one issue. On page 6, under D, locations preferences, it says east of Alvalantic Avenue,
Yeah.
right? Is it Atlantic Avenue east or, in other words, can it be on Atlantic Avenue or east of Atlantic Avenue?
The intent was to be east of Atlantic
So
Avenue.
none on Atlantic Avenue, right?
Well, no. East of Atlantic Avenue would be oceanfront parking lots.
Well, except you could have them, so it's,
In the public right-of-way east of east of Atlantic Avenue.
You don't want them there,
That, yes.
yes. But isn't that a preference? We're saying we don't want them there, but
We're
what if
saying
they
should
s-
avoid, we're saying should avoid proposing.
Okay,
But then when you get into the design standards, we speak to the fact that if you can't locate,
then,
yes.
yeah, okay.
but there's a lot of, generally, there's a lot of formatting issues in those documents. A lot of spaces and periods don't match up and stuff.
Do you know what, that's, Lou, what I think that is, was when they made corrections, and you know, you go through and you do it, it just has to be the formatting, yeah, that's all.
All right, on page 11, page 1121. I'm just going to, where it says, it starts at, kind of in the middle of 21, says, no later than 45 days from the date facility is determined to have ceased operation or the permittee has notified the town council. Why, the town council's never been involved in this document, it's always been the town manager.
It's a typo,
The town manager, right?
yes. Or his designee, yeah.
Or designate, but, yeah. On page 12, on 23 records, kind of in the middle, what is a ministerial permit?
Where's that?
It's 23 on page 12. What is that? A ministerial permit? I just don't understand what that means.
I would offer that it's permits that the town uses to administer the document, the ordinance. But I can clarify that for you.
Yeah, could you? On the same page, under eligible facilities requisites, subsection 2, next to last sentence, what does coterminous mean? They seem like awful legal terms here.
Yeah. Oh, I think the same, it would terminate at the same time?
Well, except, I mean, we shouldn't be a little more specific? I mean, these are words I'm not familiar with.
Well, you're not supposed to be.
It's like a lawyer wrote this.
Well, that whatever the permit we're speaking to will terminate at the same time
I just
other
got-
underlying permits do.
That's it, yeah.
Can't we just clean it up a bit? So, I mean, this is supposed to be for the general public to read, right?
No, it's supposed to obfuscate everything.
Well,
No, it's-
that's all I have.
All right.
Yeah. But-
Other questions regarding
Oh.
this ordinance?
Yeah, hold on a minute now. Yeah, at the top of page 3 of 15, III, Roman numeral I,
Yeah, yeah.
3. It does not extend an existing structure on which it is.
Yeah, I actually had a problem with that, too.
And then there was,
Kind of like the R, though, but
and, yeah, and all the town managers there, THEIR, it
well,
just,
sometimes it's it,
it's it, yeah, it.
yes. They go back and forth with
I
it.
know, but that's okay. Let me see now, I did have, I had a question about it refers to fees and everything established by this article
Where-
throughout.
where are we
here.
at?
Well, throughout
Oh,
here.
all right,
There are
fees, yeah.
several places that it talks about fees and the fees that are supposed to be presented up front. Are we going to, as a part of the budget for 2022, establish fees for this, or is that something that, because isn't the fee going to be based on whatever this JMT charges?
Yes, and that's passed on directly to the vendor.
Okay.
John, how did we go back and forth with that, with the fee? Do you remember? Do you remember?
We would have a permit fee to the town of $240 or $250, and then and that is per permit. So it doesn't mean per location, it would be per permit if they put numerous under there, say up to 5 different locations, I think it's specified. And then associated with that fee would be JMT's cost of their services throughout, which they said could be a rough estimate of around $1,200. But that's also for ongoing inspections of these facilities as well,
So
once they are installed.
when they submit their original application, do they submit the 250 or the 1,200?
They'll submit the 250, and then they'll be billed when they get done with their
Okay.
work.
And also, Cliff, there's a requirement that we have. It says, "Town council information cover sheet for proposals that involve the creation of a new or updated version of the existing town ordinances." That's supposed to be covered.
And then, I had another question. On page 6 of 15, under design standards down at the bottom of the page, E, it talks about the town council may develop, it's the 4th line up, may develop and implement acceptable designs and development standards for wireless facilities in the public right-of-way, taking into account the zoning districts bounding the public right-of-way. And then it says, once codified, any updates to such standards shall be at the reasonable discretion of the town manager. So is the codification this? Okay, thank you. And when would you issue a waiver under 7 of 15? Page 7 of 15 under waivers, D.
And your question, Rosemary?
Oh, I was just wondering, when would they not have to follow this, or when would they have to be eligible for a waiver? It was something so simple, or they've done it before, or?
There are different areas, and I think some of them are actually contained in the resolution where you can apply for a waiver of
Okay.
different requirements.
Okay. And then, Cliff, on page 9 of 15, under number 9, indemnities, it says, "The permittee, and if applicable, the owner of the property on which the wireless facility is installed." Is the owner of the property, is that like a telephone pole, or, that's not real property, is it?
Hotel?
It could be Delmarva Power there's an antenna, a Verizon antenna on the Delmarva Power
Okay.
pole.
Can I ask another question?
Nope.
No.
On page 7 of 15, under fees, just explain to me what this means. It's the last sentence, says, "Notwithstanding the foregoing, no application fee shall be refundable in whole or part to an applicant for a wireless encroachment permit unless paid as a refundable deposit." I don't understand that.
So I would imagine in the permitting application, there's X number of dollars that are listed as a refundable deposit. But
And part of it's not?
Once you get past that, then that's not refunded.
Oh, all right.
Cliff, under 13 of 15, number C, municipal infraction. will we be establishing penalties there for this section?
Yes.
Okay.
Along that same section, upon conviction, who convicts? Us?
Yes, it would be a municipal ordinance.
We be the convictors?
Yes.
All right.
No,
The
the alderman would be
the government, yeah.
the government, yes.
It, yeah, and a lot of this, I mean, we don't have a lot of, I mean, we can put things in here like do this, do that, co-locate and all this kind of stuff, but when push comes to shove, they actually have a lot more power or a lot more,
That's, that co-location
have.
is one of the things that they might be granted a waiver for.
yeah, okay,
So, any more questions on this?
no.
Okay.
Anybody else, any questions? Mr. Fry, any questions?
No questions?
Does any member of the public have questions? Are we monitoring that?
The next item to consider is the resolution establishing design development standards for wireless facilities in the public right-of-way. I put at each place a couple of colored documents with photos, and if you all would just take a quick second to review them.
I love you with all the cactus.
Yeah. So, when we discuss the design standards, you'll see reference to stealth. This doesn't speak to camouflage at all, but stealth is the word that they're using. And in the industry, they talk about stealth and camouflage. To be very, very clear, stealth and camouflage seem like misnomers for these alternative antennas.
They're still there.
They're neither stealth nor are they camouflage.
All right.
And,
I mean, I think that's stealth, but that's camouflage, right?
well, I mean, camouflage, it's supposed to blend. I mean, well, the ones I've seen, I just
Where I
don't,
used to live, they had one of those.
I think it's,
Looks like a big tree.
so, we need to, when we do this and we think about this, we need to temper our expectations.
Right.
And everyone needs to understand, I'm sorry we didn't make this part of the briefing material for everyone to look at, but it's easy to find when you Google or search for stealth applications or camouflage applications for 5G antennas. So they are metal poles. We received some criticism regarding the installation at the end of the parking lot, east side parking lot of Ocean View Parkway, because we didn't use a stealth application. Well, a stealth application would have been a 35, is that a 35-footer, John? 35-foot large pole
Yeah.
that maybe we could have painted sky blue with a big can at the top, and as opposed to what else is in that area, the pole that's installed there is in keeping with what's on Atlantic in that general area in Bethany Beach. So that's why that pole was selected. And again, that was an installation that we could not deny because of coverage issues. Co-locating back at the edge of the island on Ocean View Parkway would not have given them the coverage they needed to get to the beach. But this lists the different things that we can do. It speaks to concealment. It speaks to trying to match color. The new page 7 that you inserted says that we prefer that you don't use wood, but then just a paragraph later, we also say that we'd like you to make sure that whatever you do install is in keeping with other similar lights. The type of things that we can expect to happen are issues over co-location, problems that may occur when more than one vendor wants to install in a general area. We may not be able to push back on that if they can prove there's a reason they can't co-locate. So what that means is we have a pole, the antenna is up, we'll say it's a Verizon pole, it's a Verizon antenna on a Delmarva pole. AT&T says we can't install because our installation would be below the Verizon, we need to be at a certain height. They would apply for a waiver, it would be reviewed, and again, these people have essentially a right to deliver signal, and we would have a pole very, very close to that other pole for an antenna. So this regulates it as much as it can be regulated, and gives us the authority to do that and change it as we want or as we need, or as maybe possibly federal code changes. And there are a number of municipalities still involved in litigating against the FCC and some of the rights that have been provided to these providers. But I think the country is in such a hurry to become 5G reliant that I don't know that'll happen.
I just had one correction here under on the design standards, under Section 2 definitions. I think that should be the definitions set forth in Article 6, Section 493-29.
It's 2.9,
Yeah.
What page is that?
first page,
First page,
Okay.
Cliff, down here under
It's under definitions,
definitions.
Article 6, Section 493.
2.9.
On page 3, should we define what a strand-mounted facility is?
Is it not,
Do we have it?
is it identified back in the right-of-way? No, we don't. Yes, we should.
On page 4, noise, shouldn't we define it as decibels and not, because a lot of people maybe not know what a dBA is? Just spell it out.
Certainly.
On page 6, accessory equipment. Since we have a lot of flooding throughout the town, do we also, some requirement to have it waterproofed? It says under accessory equipment, it has all these, but, camouflage, all that stuff. But also, because we have flooding issues in this town, it should be able to be waterproofed in some way, so water doesn't enter the accessory equipment.
We can ask the attorneys if that's a reasonable request.
Just a thought. Because I don't know where they're going to be, but in certain streets, they can be under conditions, flood.
I would imagine that's like a business decision that experienced vendors would probably make right out of the,
That's all I have.
Anybody else? No. Mr. Fry?
No,
Okay. They did a very good job with this.
well, they broke it down, everything wasn't, just compared to the one I gave you
That's
all
what
here
I
a couple
mean,
years ago.
compared to the
it's,
one we had a couple of
yes,
years ago.
It's workable, and the way they're approaching it with the resolution and separating it
Yeah.
makes it even more workable, so.
It's kind of ironic in today's modern world, I'll put that in quotes. When they put out this 5G and put all these little small cells all through our town, and 6G comes along and says, you don't need any of that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm glad that we have in here that they also have the responsibility when it's not used anymore, it has to come off. It has to come down, so. But you know it's coming. It's 6G or 7G or whatever it's gonna be. Huh? 12. Yeah. So,
And thank you and John and Susan and everybody who
This is really
worked with them.
important
This is
stuff.
very
I
good,
mean,
very
really,
well
and
done.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
very detailed.
Yeah.
And Lou likes the words you put in. See, you learned something new. Okay, if we're finished with that, do you want to go on to the last item?
Sure.
Okay. Last item on the agenda is discuss and review possible changes to the scheduling of town-sponsored events. Mr. Gravier. Thank you.
Yeah, Cliff, I'll take one too. Here you go.
Just pace it to it.
Yeah, if you hold it up, I'll take a picture.
See, this is the problem with
Yeah,
helicopters.
yeah.
So let me tell you, Mr. Fry, what it is. It's one page with 3 months of a calendar with a lot of stuff on it, and then one page with not a lot of stuff on it.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Just so you know.
They're different colors, Bruce.
Do you have any comments on it, Mr. Fry?
No.
Yeah, I think the 4th of July parade should probably be in July, if we had one.
Mayor, Council, last year gave us an opportunity to experience certainly a little bit of a different summer in Bethany Beach. And hopefully, we won't see that again this year. But one of the things that it did do, it gave us a little bit of an opportunity to look at a downtown Bethany Beach in July and August that was a little less crowded and in its own way seemed a good bit more commodious, accommodating, and inviting than what we normally see in our Julys and Augusts. When you talk to business owners about July and August, and you talk to them, well, what do you need to be more successful, to have more people come to your restaurant or enter your shop? You hear that you don't need to do much, that essentially our stores are very crowded, and we actually have to turn people away sometimes at the door in July and August, depending on the time of day. So we have an awful large number of people that come to Bethany July and August, most especially, to the point in time that, again, I think we're seeing crowding on our sidewalks and crowding on our boardwalk that certainly doesn't belie the quiet resort or the family resort that we are. And thinking about what we might do to maybe bring a little bit more peace and quiet and more of a family atmosphere in Bethany, especially during the height of the summer, one of the things that comes to mind is what we do with movies and special events and bonfires and performances. The human condition, human nature is to always want to do more and to do better. And over the last 20 or so years, we went from just having one event to 2 events, to 3 events, to 4 events. And I think we've become more or less victims of our own success in doing that, if you will. That maybe we've reached the point in time where we think about, to a certain degree, pushing back on crowding, again, that makes us a less accommodating place to live and to visit. In thinking about how to do that, and at the same time trying to create a positive out of it at the same time, so it's not perceived as a negative, is the thought that we should, and we hear this from business owners, and sometimes we hear it from residents, especially now that our resident year-round population is growing a little bit, is that maybe we should work to do more in our shoulder seasons and do a little less in the height of the summer months. So what you have here is a draft suggestion and a look at what we might do in a May, June, July, August, September scenario, where we focus on having only 2 events a week, except for our July 4th week, where we would do more. And we try to do that through May and through September, and we would also try to do it through October, because the average mean temperature during October the last 3 to 4 years has been about 61 or 62 degrees. We are having beautiful Octobers, and the thought was that we would also be able to do, maybe continue to do movies and entertainment through October, and we're taking a look at April, where it's a little cooler. The variation over the last 3 to 4 years has been like 54 to 59 degrees the last 2 weeks in April, or April as on a whole, the last 2 or 3 years. But maybe do bonfires, and Julie is looking into what temperature bands like to operate in, and to see if April might be something some of our entertainment, some of the groups that we use will consider as a venue during that time period. So this is a proposal. I think that by extending our season, I think we do more for our residents, more for our visitors, more for our businesses who are busy during the very busy months, but not as busy as they may like in the shoulder season. And I'm just asking you all to consider this and tell me what you think, and think if we should consider doing this possible year, maybe.
And anybody have any thoughts? Mr. Healy?
I've always believed that if you go from September...
Oh, Joe, could you speak into the mic? Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry. I've always believed that if you go from September 15th to October 15th is the nicest time down here, really. And I think that's what you're saying to some extent. Utilize that.
Yes, and realize that no matter what, we're going to have substantial crowds, whether we have shows or not. And why should we add to that? Why should we pull people in town who are only shuttling in to see the performance, getting back on the shuttle to leave at a point in time where our streets and boardwalk, even our beach, might be more enjoyable if we weren't doing that in the dead of summer? And then to push it out so people can still have that enjoyment, still see those shows that they like in the off-season. And doing that in an October framework, and maybe even into late April and early May, we could do bandstand performances at 5:30 or 6 o'clock on a Saturday, and not at 7 or 7:30, and still take advantage of the nice weather.
Cliff, what would you think about, the weekend seems to be more people in the town than during the week, moving the concerts to, instead of on Saturday night, have on Wednesday night?
That's a good point. That you'll see here that we move things to Tuesday as opposed to having entertainment on Saturday. But a very good point, because our weekends are more crowded. So should we consider maybe a Monday and Friday, or a Monday, Thursday? Yeah, that's something to consider.
Something to consider, so that, weekend seems to be the worst time for the pack. Obviously, the town is very crowded all summer long, but on the weekends it's even worse. If we were to move concerts to Wednesday or a different night of the week, maybe...
And it's the same analogy I make with July and August.
Yeah.
There's nothing, we don't need to do anything more to bring any more here.
Yeah.
And one of the things that drives us, I think, and again, speaking about success ruining different things or making places less desirable, I think working to maintain what we have here as the quiet family resort we are, and making sure that we push back, I think crowding is having a negative impact on communities to the south of us and communities to the north of us, to the point in time that you see family businesses that have been, say, in Rehoboth for decades, moving out of town, businesses that have been in families for decades selling in Rehoboth. And certainly the crowding in South Ocean City is something we would never want to see. So what can we do? What small steps can we take ourselves to try to change that and try to keep us the quiet family resort that we all, I think, want the town to be?
Since we have a finite number of homes that are rented and so forth, it would seem logical that we could move things away from the weekend as much as possible to keep the crowd down.
Well, that's a good point. Again, I had thought the July and August, but that's the same thing. So residents and visitors, renters, will still be able to take advantage of it regardless.
Right.
Yes.
I like it. I like the idea.
Mr. Fry?
As always, Cliff is always looking ahead. I really appreciate that. You did a great job last year figuring out the parking before I even thought about it or making the mask mandatory. So I think you're probably right. I just hadn't thought about this before, and it's worth an experiment.
Lauren Weaver with an excellent point, but something we could potentially modify. She's speaking to the fact that that going to weeknights, especially if we're talking about October, September, April, and May, would be a problem for families with children. So maybe in the shoulder season, we move to Saturday.
Yeah, move it to Saturday in the shoulder season, but during the heavy
Yes,
July, August, maybe move it to the middle.
and during the summer season, just move to the
keep
weekday.
the day trippers.
Good point.
Yeah.
And this is all tentative right now for this year.
This is tentative right now because unless somebody has a much better crystal ball than I have, I'm not sure.
I just wanted to make that
Yes.
point, yes, so nobody relies on
There's
it.
obviously the availability of groups and
Yes.
and
Yeah.
other times too. Because have they all been booked already?
No.
No.
Venues, we're not booking anyone just yet.
All right, fine.
Okay, but I wanted to have this discussion before we begin to explore what we can do. And again, the thought would be, because it is cooler, spring coming into summer, would be possibly the bonfire and entertainment during those months. And as the summer transitions and stays warmer into the shoulder season in the fall, we might do continue movies and entertainment.
Yeah, good idea.
Good,
And were very well accepted by the business community too.
yes.
I think that, again, everyone's fairly busy there in the summer, so this is something that may be a benefit also.
Thank you. Anybody else, any comments, questions? Okay, I guess that's it. Do you want to still meet? Okay, do we need a motion to, no further business, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you all.